World of Warcraft isn't one game, it's two games in one, player versus environment and player versus player. And there's always been some tug between balancing and designing for both aspects. There's sometimes changes made for the sake of one aspect that are detrimental to the other, but probably even more often is there are changes not made because it would be too detrimental to the other. And ever since the Burning Crusade, there has been some tension between players predominantly in either camp favoring one aspect. However, what is sometimes overlooked or forgotten is that both aspects of the game are mutually reinforcing. Every PvPer has quested in dragon slaying, probably even raided, and most likely enjoyed it at some point along their WoW experience. Then there are raiders, many of whom wouldn't raid or even be subscribed to the game if there was no PvP. Even if a raider doesn't PvP, it's likely that many others they play with do. But not only do players overlap and enjoy both aspects, but they each actually make the other better. You know all the noobs and scrubs that you 1vx in the world or in battlegrounds? They're probably primarily questers and dungeon raiders. Raiding has sometimes had a competitive horde versus alliance dimension to it, and PvP has largely helped PvE by providing interesting world conflict in key hotspots like instance entrances and big resource slash quest nodes, and generally had the potential to make the world feel more alive. Some PvEers may not have liked it as much, but again, many people they played with did. The fact that the two aspects are mutually reinforcing and both important for the life of the game is obvious from the dump in subscriptions over the past two expansions. Practically by Blizzard's own admission, the majority of the loss in subscriptions are due to dissatisfaction with the state of PvP rather than PvE. We know this is true because raiding has steadily become more and more accessible to more people, and there hasn't been any hint by Blizzard that that design choice has hurt their player base. People will eventually get tired of AI content, and there isn't much Blizzard can do about it besides release more content. On the other hand, player vs player games always have a longer replay value for the amount of time they take to develop compared to player vs AI games. Just look at the custom map scene in StarCraft 2. Since its release, at least 90% of the most popular games on the front page are player vs player games. I've been watching it over the past 2 years, and I've seen great cooperative games rise, perhaps into the front page, but then fall to third, fourth, fifth page, and into oblivion. And how many people are still playing the Wings of Liberty campaign? No one compared to as many of those playing games on Battle.net, but certainly ladder and custom games stem from the campaign. Player vs player in WoW has much greater replayability because it's intimate and never the same twice. And even with the most minimal attention paid to it, PvP gameplay has evolved a ton over the life of WoW, while raiding gameplay has basically stayed the same. And when I say minimal attention, I mean it. There have been 39 dungeons and 25 new raids compared to 5 battlegrounds, 5 arenas, and 2 PvP zones from Burning Crusade to Cataclysm. But even with such little comparative development, I'd be willing to bet that at max level, the total amount of time spent in PvP zones vastly outnumbers the time spent in dungeons and raids. I don't have the data to prove it, but it's clearly true based on queue times. And there was no reason that WoW couldn't achieve continuous growth, nor that it can in the future until Blizzard's next MMO comes out. If Blizzard hadn't shown such a low regard for PvP in the last 2 expansions, WoW would be continuing to grow to this day because PvP has a greater potential to be long-lasting. There's another reason good PvP contributes to the vitality of the game, and that's online extra game content like videos and tournaments. One thing Blizzard didn't realize for a while was that competitive PvP and awesome PvP videos are part of what keeps players motivated and interested in WoW and subscriptions up. Just look at WarcraftMovies.com in the past 8 years and it's completely obvious that PvP played a huge role in maintaining interest in the game. Look at the quantity and quality of PvP videos compared to PvE, and it's not even close. And now recently, in the last year or two, we're seeing an explosion of content on YouTube and websites where third parties can even make money, like Skillcapped and Next Level PvP. Player vs player provides a major advantage because who's going to watch someone else do a raid or a dungeon after they do it themselves? You do the content to do the content, then maybe a few more times to get the gear you want, then why bother again unless you have an alt or secondary spec or are running guildmates? A little bit about my own experience. Back in the Burning Crusade, my first main was a mage, and I was one of the top 2 mages on the server in Season 2 until I was forced to quit the game. But while I was unsubscribed, I occasionally would watch PvP videos until I saw No 1 3, the most badass mage video I had yet to see. No 1 3 inspired me, and I eventually told myself I'm gonna be like No 1 and destroy those damn warlocks, the class I hate the most even to this day. And I did. I came back in Season 4 and got Gladiator in the only season I ever stayed to the end for besides Season 1, but I would never have decided to come back and do that if, number 1, people weren't making crazy awesome PvP videos, and number 2, if I didn't think it was worth it. Because if it's not worth it, why would people make or watch videos? And even if the videos are awesome, why would people be inspired to subscribe and try it for themselves if they know that the game behind the videos is a joke? After getting Glad, Wrath came along with Season 5, which is so terrible that I just sold my account. Fast forward now, and Mists of Pandaria might have some actual competition from Guild Wars 2, and perhaps Forge further down the line. The real purpose of this video is to convince Blizzard to put more work and attention into PvP and adopt more policies that will improve the game for the only reason that motivates the leadership, because it affects their bottom line. I want Blizzard to realize that PvPers have leverage. Fun, balanced, and competitive PvP is the best thing that will maintain the game, the lack of which will only contribute to further decline. If Blizzard fails to deliver enough improvements, the next time we unsubscribe, there may be something else to catch our attention and we may never come back. So what do we want? Ultimately, we want to be able to say, I'm not just playing a game that's fun to play, I'm playing a game that's competitive and respected, where there's a worthy goal I can reach and great players I can watch and admire who are also striving for that goal, like what StarCraft and other competitive gamers have. Even if the majority of PvPers don't play competitively or care about the competitions, just the fact that it's possible and that there are players who do, for lack of a better word, legitimizes the fun they're having and makes it better. Generally, PvPers want balance, or as close to balance as the game can possibly get, because it will never be perfect, but it can always get better. We want Blizzard to devote multiple times more attention to PvP balance than they have in the past, and so far it does look like they have a good start. But what about specifics? After watching and looking into Guild Wars 2 and other prospective WoW competitors, I personally don't think they're going to be better off in terms of fun, complexity, design, skill, and competitive play, but they may have a few things going for them over Mists, and I truly hope they do well because Blizzard desperately needs some competition. There are a few qualities these new games will have over WoW, namely balanced gearing and reduced RNG. But what I said in the beginning about WoW being 2 games in 1 is important. WoW is first and foremost an MMORPG, and imbalance and RNG are core qualities of RPGs. They even to some extent make WoW's PvP better, but in the long run can be detrimental. All PvPers, even professional ones, do still enjoy the honor and conquest point race for better gear that starts at the beginning of each season, as long as by the middle to the end of the season, when competition matters more, everyone has equal level gear, then that's fine. I think completely standardized gear is a bad design for an RPG because it's the complete opposite of an RPG. But the scaling between seasons has to be toned down. One reason is because the more gear scales, the better chance balance is thrown off from season to season. From what it looks like, Blizzard is really trying hard to take scaling into account, but it won't be perfect and shifts will occur. So as a safety, the best thing to do would be to mitigate it by toning down scaling overall. Another reason to tone down scaling is because it affects PvP accessibility. It looks like Blizzard is trying to appeal to a fresh crowd with Mists, but the barrier to PvP is going to remain large if the newbies first enter combat zones at max level and everyone else has 50% more stats than they do, and they just get stomped. Another specific is RNG. Random number generation in WoW creates constant variations in gameplay for the player. It's especially important to questing and dungeon raiding because otherwise it can be stale and unchanging if you just use the same ability order and deal the same damage all the time. In a competitive PvP environment, some RNG can be acceptable and maybe even wanted, and it's certainly understandable in the WoW MMO context, but it should continuously be minimized as much as possible. I initially thought Blizzard was making an attempt to reduce RNG in Mists, and it does look like they are trying in some cases, like changing mage impact, but there are other cases where it's gotten even worse, like with the Shaman class. Some things can easily be fixed, like putting Fingers of Frost on a point system and changing Elemental's mastery. Then there are things like the bad design of critical hit rating. There's no longer a compelling reason, even aesthetically, to have any critical hits do 100% extra effectiveness as opposed to 50% in either the PvP or PvE context. It's even worse for PvP because some extra buffs and abilities proc off crits, giving RNG more weight, and even more worse when heal crits are 100% extra. As I said in an earlier video of mine, buffing critical heals was a terrible change for both PvP and raiding, and it would be sad if it's too late to revert it because 200% heals are going to be terrible in Mists. I've played a healer some, and it's not a good feeling when you save someone's tune just because you're lucky on one roll, even in PvE, and that's just one problem with it. One easy way to fix critical hits would be to remove crit bonus from primary stats, give everything a base 10% or so crit chance, set the base crit bonus to 50%, and then change the rating to also increase the critical hit damage and healing, and calculate it so that its total effectiveness increases linearly rather than exponentially scaling itself, like how armor is calculated. This will make crit rating an aesthetically burstier stat, and it will be cool for people who like to see bigger and bigger numbers, though it will always be less than 100% increased crits, and that's the point, to reduce the strength of RNG more and more. Or simply remove crit bonus from primary stats, set crits to 150%, and increase the chance given by rating. then change or remove critical hit procs and throw in reduced gear scaling to ensure that the rating doesn't get out of control. But it's unfeasible and probably even unwanted to completely remove RNG from PvP, but there's a balance to be found somewhere. There's a balance to be found in every case of conflict between PvE and PvP, and the PvP community needs to convince Blizzard that it hasn't been found yet, and that PvP should hold more weight than it has in the past, but while keeping in mind that both aspects of the game are mutually reinforcing. So changes need to be fair and considerate, and Blizzard should listen for their own sake. I'm sure everyone has their own opinions on PvP and for their own classes, and I urge you all to keep making yourselves heard. So this is my own threatening plea to Blizzard. Pretty please, with blueberries and cookies on top, continue to improve PvP or potentially face the consequences. Thanks for listening.